Hi, I'm Obsessing Again. With the release of the new film Alien Romulus, it felt fitting to revisit this gaming classic 10 years later. This is a spoiler-free video. An IP as spine-tingling as Alien is, there's a collection of many mediocre games, but this game couldn't be further from the truth. A retrospective look at this game a decade after its release shows that it has not only stood the test of time, but also feels refreshing. Casting your mind back to 2014, this game is very in keeping with the thrills of games like Outlast and the errand running of Fallout 4. Though Alien Romulus is set before Alien Isolation, visually they have undeniable visual cues. This film franchise began in 1979 by the now renowned Sir Ridley Scott. Looking at both the original film and this game holistically, it's clear to see why they were both successful. Alien is a gradual story which beautifully sets up the desolate feelings of travelling interplanetary, and the discovery of new life. Its takes on futurism for 21,022 may seem laughably antiquated for its tech, but its retro sci-fi take is just as engaging for today's audiences. The trepidation of seeing the Nostromo crew picked off by a thing is gripping. Alien Isolation bridges the story of this franchise, being set between Alien and Aliens. In this game, seeing the baton passed over from the iconic Ellen Ripley to Amanda Ripley is fitting, and it feels appropriate. My initial impression, which has lasted throughout my experience with this game, is a striking set recreation. It feels seamless from the film over to digital. The quirky ornaments, people's quarters, to the fumes arising from vents. This dingy colour palette and low ceilings convey the feelings of slight claustrophobia. It's marginally unsettling, but is quickly overlooked for finding crafting components and looking at restoring power. What can't be ignored is the stiff, awkwardly positioned characters you encounter. It can be forgiven if you take into account this game was developed for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 generation. For the sci-fi films and media representation of its time, Sigourney Weaver embodied a very different type of woman in the Alien films. She was far from a damsel in distress, whilst avoiding the trappings of being just eye candy for male audiences. She's assertive, to a point, but overlooked and undervalued in her team. As the series progresses, she becomes a defiant and resilient character. For Alien Isolation, many moments of fear are how you embody being in this environment. Amanda Ripley's mission is to find a flight log to explain the disappearance of her mother. So while it's cute to connect the timeline lore of Alien, Amanda Ripley is mainly a vessel for you to interject your feelings. Many periods of the game are spent tiptoeing, shimmying and gently leaning over desk ledges. When Ripley begins to talk in a cutscene or interact with a person in-game, you struggle to care about her motivations and desires. The sparseness and long periods of silence could have been interjected with internal monologues of dread. In the films and this new character, it seems like the Ripley woman is the only rational character, or the one with a balanced moral compass. Sound design is important, like any game, but for stealth it's a core component. A darker environment with suspenseful music can make any heart race. Combining these actions with having active audience participation is thrilling. The score is haunting, and the wailing sirens that echo in the corridors are beyond jarring. Moments of this game were spent having to grin and bear it as you flee from under a desk and into an air vent. The atmosphere of stray sounds, live wires buzzing along the floor, or the dreaded shutter opening from behind you gives you the chills. A game can be elevated or drastically forgotten if these things aren't well executed. In recent experiences, the Callisto Protocol limped over the finish line, for me, with poorly timed sound effects and cheap jump scares that weren't earned. And to round it off, a story that began to outstay its welcome. For its time and even today's market, this is a prolonged horror survival. Games like Soma creep towards 10 hours on average, and Isolation clocks in at 18 hours for solely during the story. To sustain this high consistency for a lengthy thriller, this is an achievement alone. A key component to this game is how sophisticated the AI is, and how rewarding the difficulty differences are. While the debates about AI permeate most conversation in today's news, gamers have become accustomed to the great possibilities for generations. Isolation's difficulty settings can provide a varied experience of wanting just to experience walking the corridors of the ships to being hunted as if you were Ripley. I would comfortably say even the lowest difficulty will provide a challenge to players. The harder difficulties go beyond enemies being bullet sponges. The working Joe's lifeless face springs into action when using the motion detection scanner nearby. You will roam the ship playing this game as if it were a simulator. Abusing the enemy's weaknesses is something we are all guilty of, but isolation forces you to diversify. Relentlessly playing one-dimensionally will give enemies creative ways to box you in. The overuse of the flamethrower will force the alien to wait for you to stop or keep a safe distance until it's time they can pounce on you, like a predator. Sections in this game I tried exploiting what I thought were closed off sections from the xenomorph, and boy was I wrong. Without the xenomorph, there is no alien. It's an iconic design that has seen slight differences over the decades. This version is very true to its first outing we are all aware of. The game gently teases it in, giving you a chance to become accustomed to the controls and the possibilities of how you can play this game. The Outlast series, for example, has similar mechanics and designs, batteries and hiding in cupboards, but its setting is nowhere near as engaging as Isolation. Seeing the xenomorph perched in a corner, peering over, is more terrifying than the cat and mouse chase of a game like Hello Neighbour. I also found great delight in using the xenomorph to my advantage with my collection of crafted gadgets. The movement, leaning and hiding is a seamless dance that is essential to evading this creature. The xenomorph itself is immensely impressive for one specific thing: the tail. Each bone, groove and shape is an individual part. It wobbles as it's dragged along the floor. It's a great detail that makes it feel more like a present threat. Seeing it stomp through the door and catching a glimpse of its tail wobble is a great detail. Your arsenal of smoke bombs and flashbangs equips you with enough fighting power, but its sophisticated AI will force you to change up your game plan. What makes a xenomorph an engaging enemy type is its movement. Typically, enemies will have a set path they will routinely follow unless a diversion occurs. Watching the xenomorph leaving a room, you feel a gentle sense of relief before it pivots and starts pacing towards you. Hacking minigames are largely forgettable or considered mainly for padding out in-game time. When done wrong, this can feel cheap, unearned and just frustrating. The minigames are straightforward in this, but oddly enticing. My justification for this is the gadgets. Aesthetically, they look very hodgepodge, and this visual clarity, dials and button pressing is immensely impressive. Each device has a distinct look and feel. It's something that could be easily glossed over, but with today's world of digital touchscreens on phones, cars and kiosks, it's refreshing. This leads me to talk about the best gadget, the motion detector. Yes, having a revolver as a last resort is handy, but the depth and utility of the motion detector are unmatched. A motion detector in most games would be constantly used, like refreshing a scanning function or jumping and rolling to move faster than just running. Like any good game, if used wrong, the motion detector could be your worst enemy. The device beeps and indicates not only where your objective is, but how close your enemy is. When using this, the actual bleeps notify enemies. Another subtle implementation that gets overlooked is when equipping this, the background blurs, forcing you to look and peer, as opposed to speedrunning with your head bowed down and your body stooped even lower. The way enemies can corner you with your gadget makes this game stand above most games even in today's market. Like any game that is 10 or more years older, regardless of budget, they show signs of aging. Face models in GTA 5 look ropey, stiff animations in older NBA games, horde modes and heavily scripted driving segments can all lead to it feeling dated. While I don't believe Isolation has dated beyond being unplayable, certain moments are frustrating. The motion capture and animations when we have an exchange between characters are stiff and suffer with a bit of jank. It's not immersion breaking, but it's signs this game could do with a remaster. In addition to this, the rooms and scale of this game are stark, and yet there are very few items or objects you can interact with, unless it's just for gameplay. The only exception is the terminal PCs you can interact with, find text and being able to submerge deep into the horror and turmoil of all these people. My personal preference would be interaction with inanimate objects. Take The Last of Us as an example. Interacting with notes is great. The character might make a passing comment or a conversation has started. As Ripley, you know very little of her or how she feels. This game mechanic would be immersion shattering in the highly tense situations of trying to evade the alien. In the down moments when you catch your breath would balance out this game a lot. It's my biggest gripe with the game. Gamers may find object interaction padding, and in some examples it is, but done with care can provide great insight into characters. Revisiting this game 10 years later feels just as relevant today. The legacy of this game is clear based on how it inspired games such as Prey, along with setting a benchmark for producing consistent fear. it demonstrates it had tremendous ways of engaging audiences without emphasis on gunplay and keeping you grounded in a setting set far into a dystopian galaxy. Alien Isolation lovingly recreates sets and feels like a simulator for those first films. It creates a tremendous tension which is sustained throughout a lengthy story. Errand running creates a bit of fatigue towards the end, but is forgiven for all the other things this game does right. For fans of the Alien films, or new ones from seeing Alien Romulus, this is the definitive gaming experience from the Alien franchise. Thank you for letting me obsess again.